In the history of American Cosa Nostra, the threat of violence is just as important as its use, and nearly every member and associate in its history is capable. There are individuals, however, who stand out even among their peers in the underworld. These mobsters are the 30 most feared wise guys in American Cosa Nostra. Number 26, Colombo soldier, Vito Guzzo Jr. In 1965, Vito Guzzo Jr. was born in Middle Village, Queens, and from day one, he was immersed in both the lifestyle and culture of La Cosa Nostra. His father, Vito Guzzo Sr., was a longtime associate of the Colombo family, who was eventually inducted as a made man later in life. His brother Anthony also became a made man after he was inducted into the Lucchese crime family. For young Vito growing up, La Cosa Nostra was all he knew. It wasn't long before Vito began to show an incredible aptitude for violence that was unrivaled by his contemporaries. Just out of high school, the NYPD came to the home of Guzzo Sr. to question his son about a beating allegedly dished out by Jr. with a baseball bat. Guzzo Sr. attacked the NYPD officers and was subsequently arrested for it. The attack, however, allowed for Guzzo Jr. to escape. Both Guzzo Sr. and Guzzo Jr. were incredibly close, and Jr. would often go with his father to check in at various mob hangouts and social clubs. Early on, he would meet an associate of his father's named Dennis Gazzado at Colombo Captain Benny Alloy's social club, the Trophy Room. Dennis Gazzado, along with his father, would mentor the young mobster, tempering Guzzo Jr.'s violent nature. Vito Guzzo Jr. would be dealt a huge blow when his father, Guzzo Sr., did not return from a hunting trip and was assumed murdered. Guzzo Jr. automatically suspected Vincent Vinny Union's Ricciardo. However, mentor Dennis Gazzardo counseled Guzzo Jr. against murdering a made man, essentially reining him in. However, Guzzo Jr. would not forget. Guzzo Jr. would hook up with the Cafe Giannini crew, where he would commit bank robberies, arson, and murder for hire, while also operating in the drug trade on the side. Guzzo would commit multiple murders during this time, including those of drug dealers Johnny Boy Ruisi and Stevie Love Pagnozzi. It was rumored that Ruisi was still alive and conscious when Guzzo Jr. lit the match and set the two on fire to destroy the bodies. During his time with the Giannini crew, he still maintained a close relationship with Dennis Gazzardo, who was made into the Colombo family in 1991. On November 1st, 1992, Dennis Gazzardo passed away at the age of 50. With no one left holding Guzzo back, Vito Guzzo Jr. immediately set out to get revenge for his father. The very next day, Vincent Vinny Union's Ricciardo and Anthony Messi were traveling in a Lincoln town car when they were boxed in by multiple cars and shot. Anthony Messi died of his wounds, but Vincent Ricciardo managed to survive the shooting. Despite Ricciardo being a made man, there were no known repercussions due to this shooting. Though Guzzo Jr. would be shot sometime later, it is unknown who did it or why. After his recovery, Guzzo Jr. would be at it again, killing car thief John Borello. Guzzo Jr. would eventually be tried for 5 murders and would take a plea of 38 years for the 5. While incarcerated, Guzzo Jr. would officially become a made man in the Colombo crime family. During the 1990s, Vito Guzzo Jr. was one of the most feared and dangerous gangsters on the street. When he is again released, he will be a force to be reckoned with. Number 25. Murder Incorporated member and Jewish mobster, Emmanuel Mendy Weiss. Emanuel Mendy Weiss was born on June 11, 1906 to Nathan Weiss and Eleanor Klein in New York City, New York. Mendy, as he was known from a young age, gravitated to a life of crime early on, and by the time he was in his early 20s, he was already a top enforcer for Louis Lepke Buckhalter. Weiss was in charge of multiple extortion schemes and labor rackets for Buckhalter, and by 1930 was known as top muscle for the Jewish mob. When the National Crime Syndicate created the Mafia enforcement arm, Murder Incorporated, Buckhalter brought Mendy Weiss into the organization, where he would be trusted with some of the mob's most important hits. On October 23, 1935, he and Charles the Bug Workman walked into the Palace Chop House in Newark, New Jersey, to murder Dutch Schultz. Weiss went up to the barmen and waiters and requested them to lie down on the floor, while at the same time Workman walked past Weiss and opened fire on Schultz and his 3 associates. All of them were fatally injured and died of their bullet wounds within a few hours or days. Immediately after the shooting, Weiss, fearing the imminent arrival of police, fled the scene and jumped into the waiting getaway car. He ordered their getaway driver, Seymour Piggy Schechter, to drive off without Workman, who was still finishing off Schultz in the restaurant's restroom. As a result of being left behind, Workman was forced to travel back towards New York alone on foot. The next day, Workman filed a complaint to the Board of Murder Incorporated that he had been abandoned by Weiss and Piggy at the murder scene, an offense punishable by death. Weiss defended himself by arguing that Workman had returned to the men's restroom not for the purpose of making sure the job had been completed, as Workman claimed, but simply for the purpose of stealing Schultz's money and other belongings. Therefore, argued Weiss, the job was already done and Workman had chose to remain at the scene strictly for selfish personal reasons, thereby jeopardizing their escape and increasing their risk of capture. In the end, it was Louis Buckhalter who was able to save his Lieutenant Weiss from being killed by the mob. On September 13, 1936, Weiss, along with Louis Capone, Philip Little Farvel Cohen, James Faraco, and Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss, took part in the murder of Brownsville candy maker Joseph Rosen. Buckhalter had ordered the murder to prevent Rosen, whom Buckhalter had earlier forced out of the garment trucking business, from making good on a threat to expose Buckhalter and his rackets to prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey. Years later, this crime eventually proved to be the undoing of Buckhalter, Weiss, and Louis Capone. The Rosen murder went unsolved for nearly 4 years. Since the police knew of no connection between Rosen and the mob, and moreover, of no enemies Rosen may have had, police had no leads to go on. Police finally caught a break in 1940 when Abe Kid Twist Rellis, a fellow Murder Incorporated enforcer, turned informant for the Brooklyn District Attorney William O'Dwyer. Rellis implicated Weiss and his colleagues in the murder and helped police clear up numerous other unsolved murders committed by Murder Inc. Fleeing to Kansas City, Weiss, under the name of James W. Bell, posed as a mining company executive, but was arrested by narcotics agents of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in April of 1941. He was then returned to New York, where he was formally charged with Rosen's murder. In late 1941, Buckhalter, Weiss, and Capone stood trial by jury in the Brooklyn courtroom of Judge Franklin Taylor for the first-degree murder of Joseph Rosen. The information provided by Rellis and other mob turncoats such as Ali Tick-Tock Tannenbaum and Max Rubin resulted in a guilty verdict and a sentence of death for each of the 3 defendants. On Saturday night, March 4th, 1944, Weiss, Capone, and Buckhalter were executed by electric chair at Sing Sing for the Rosen murder. During one of the most violent eras of organized crime, Weiss lived the way he died, violently. Number 24. Harry Happy Mayon. Harry Mayon was born on October 7, 1908 in New York City. He gravitated to gang life early on when, as a young man, Mayon led the Ocean Hill Hooligans, an Italian street gang in the Ocean Hill, Brooklyn section of New York. His protege in this gang was Frank the Dasher Abbandando. It was in his youth Mayon was given the nickname Happy as a joke because of the near-permanent scowl on his face. Harry Happy Mayon was introduced to murder at a young age. In 1931, Mayon and Abbandando helped Abe Kid Twist Rellis and Martin Bugsy Goldman eliminate their gangster rivals, the Shapiro brothers, Meyer, Irving, and William. Previously that year, the Shapiros had tried unsuccessfully to murder Rellis and Goldstein. Meyer Shapiro then abducted Rellis's girlfriend and raped her. Rellis and Goldstein wanted revenge, and the two wanted to take over the Shapiros' criminal rackets. So on July 11, 1931, Irving Shapiro was gunned down near his apartment. On September 17, 1931, Meyer was found shot to death in the basement of a tenement building on Manhattan's Lower East Side. 3 years later, on orders from Buckhalter, they would finally get Willie Shapiro. On the night of July 20th, 1934, the last Shapiro brother was supposedly buried alive in a sandpit, which was located in the marshlands of Canarsie, by Rellis, the Amberg brothers, Frank Abbandando, and Harry Mayon. Not long after, Mayon, Abbandando, Rellis, and Goldstein banded together. They were soon joined by others including Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss, Albert Tick-Tock Tannenbaum, and Charles the Bug Workman. The gang started picking up murder contracts from the National Crime Syndicate with the help of syndicate board member Joe Adonis. The gang soon became the official murder-for-hire squad of the syndicate and was dubbed Murder Incorporated by the press. Mayon acted as the Italian liaison to the Jewish members of Murder Incorporated. Rellis was his counterpart on the Jewish side. Murder Incorporated was directed by the brutal Louis Lepke Buckhalter and the nefarious Albert the Executioner Anastasia. Mayon reportedly killed at least 12 men himself while working for Murder Incorporated. In the mid-1930s, New York District Attorney Thomas E. Dewey targeted Buckhalter for prosecution. In response, Buckhalter started eliminating all potential witnesses. Murder Incorporated rubbed out anyone that Buckhalter even suspected of being an informant. Loan shark Georgie Whitey Rudnick was one such victim. He was killed by Mayon, Abbandando, and Strauss on May 11, 1937. In 1940, Rellis became an informant for the state of New York. He then implicated Mayon and Abbandando in the horrific slaying of Rudnick. According to Rellis, the men supposedly killed Rudnick and started stuffing him in the back of their car. Suddenly, the corpse started coughing. To finish him off, Strauss stabbed Rudnick 63 times with an ice pick, and Mayon buried a meat cleaver in his skull. In May 1940, Mayon was convicted of first-degree murder, but the verdict was overturned on appeal. After a second trial, Mayon was convicted again. This time, the conviction was not overturned by an appeals court. On February 19, 1942, Mayon, along with Frank Abbandando, were executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison in Ossining, New York. Like Mendy Weiss, Harry Happy Mayon lived a violent, brutal life. And just like Mendy Weiss, he was executed for it.